And even while I'm studying for this exam, and then after I pass it, I'm kind of looking around going, is this it? Like, is this it? Like, what's next? And do I really want to do this for the next 30 years of my life?
Where would you like to start as far as what you'd like to share with us about yourself right out of the gate?
I love it. My name is Jake Kennington. I'm a father, a husband. I've got 4 little kids, ages 2 to 11, 2 girls and 2 boys. I grew up in Fresno, California for most of my life, where I spent 35 years of my life there. Recently relocated to near Salt Lake City in a town called Lehi, Utah. So my day job here is structural engineer. I do that 4 days a week. And then I own a company called Actively Human, where I help established professionals step into their next chapter by design, not by default.
The reason I wanted to have a conversation with you, Jake, is because you really hit a pain point that hit home with me and I think resonates with a lot of people. You talk about a lot of times mid-career professionals, we've arrived at this point where, okay, we've got a good title, maybe we're even making a good income, but there's something that just feels off, whether that's with the meaning of our work or just maybe feeling dissatisfied, but there's just something off. And I know in your experience and kind of your background, you got to this moment where you realized that, well, your life looked really successful on paper. You were doing pretty well, but you didn't maybe feel as successful inside. I mean, you were designing, I think you said $100 million buildings, which I imagine is very high stakes, high pressure, all of that good stuff. So what was kind of that first crack, maybe in the facade or that social media reel that made you kind of question the path that you were on?
Yeah, it's always hard to pinpoint. I mean, hindsight's 2020, and so it's a little easier looking back. In the moment, you're kind of like, people use words like stuck or disengaged, or they're just not showing up to work and in their family life and other things like as much as they want to be. For me, the first crack, again, looking back, was probably my physical health. I was overweight and out of shape. And, I'm in my mid 30s and I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I'm not 21, but I'm not old by any stretch of the imagination. And yet I'm not going to the gym. I'm not eating right. Again, I'm overweight and just not happy with my physical appearance. And so that's probably the most easily identifiable crack, if you want to call it that, to somebody that's kind of disengaged and not really living to their most potential that they could.
Okay. And I think that, yes, for sure, the body keeps the score. And so physically, I think our body's like trying to get our attention, right? Something, alert, something doesn't feel right. And I think there's a lot of us listening who have probably felt the same way. But we kind of just grin and bear it. We stay put. And so I'm just kind of curious, after your body is sending you these signals, how do you kind of start to connect that this is beyond just my physical health? There's something not right with where I'm going down. And how do you actually get the courage to make a change?
I love that thing you said there, the body keeps score, right? And so the irony of that is when you make the shift and you start working on your physical health and you start going to the gym and eating better, you start to sleep better, you start to be nicer to be around. And so my wife told me that one time. I have a morning routine that I developed. It's pretty simple. It's read, write, and run. Those are the 3 things that I do. And even if I don't run, I might walk. And I did that for several months. And she, out of the blue, I didn't solicit this feedback or ask her anything, but I got back from doing my morning routine one day and she said, you know what? You're a lot nicer to be around when you do these things. And so I took that as, an affirmation of like, okay, I'm headed in the right direction. I'm working on myself, which actually isn't selfish. It's of self-interest, but it's actually of interest of everyone around you, right? The teams that you're on, whether that be your family or your work environment or anything else. Whenever you work on yourself, you show up better to help other people. And so I think that's what I would say is like I worked on myself in the morning and that was the best results that I got with my relationships with my wife and my family and the other teams that I'm on.
So you're starting to get better. The people around you are noticing it. And I just want to commend you, because a lot of times we think that investing in ourselves personally is selfish. There's so many people counting on us, our family,
Sure.
our jobs, all our coworkers, all of that stuff. But you said, hey, I'm going to intentionally make a change. So now physically you're feeling better, but there's something feeling off professionally. And you kind of go, okay, I want to do something different. Not that you had arrived at what appeared to be successful. Everybody would look at you and say, gosh, he's got it all. But for you, you were like, there's just a little something off. So talk to me about the process that led you to getting to, hey, I'm designing all these buildings. They've got my 9 to 5 to, I want to pursue greater meaning and purpose.
Yeah, so you nailed it on the head. That physical health, that change there was kind of the thread that I started to pull, and the whole thing started to unravel in a sense of like, well, there's this other, that might have been a symptom of the underlying problem, but what really is the problem? And for me, going back to 2010, 11, 12, when I chose to become an engineer in school, because that's what I leaned towards. I was more left-brained, logical, analytical. I liked the math and the sciences, and so I went into engineering. And I loved my roots there. I loved my profession. I still do. I loved that I chose that. But as time progressed and I got my career, graduated from college, had some experience within engineering, and you know this about, I know your background in real estate and getting credentialed and taking tests and things like that. For structural engineering, you take 3 separate tests. The last test you take is 16 hours. It's 2 days long. And the pass rate is under 20%. And there aren't that many people that even take this exam. And I had to take it 3 different times because I couldn't pass. And so for me, I'm reaching kind of this pinnacle of my career. There's still experience beyond getting that license and passing that test. But it was kind of like, okay, once you pass this test, you've arrived, you're the expert. People can come to you to answer their questions for anything structural engineering. And even while I'm studying for this exam, and then after I pass it, I'm kind of looking around going, is this it? Like, is this it? Like, what's next? And do I really want to do this for the next 30 years of my life? And so I think anybody listening to this probably might have gone through this same experience in their own career, in their own life, where they've reached a point where, again, there's more experience to be had, but on some regard, you're the expert. And you kind of think, I don't know if this is what I signed up for. I don't know if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And there's no knock on that either. Again, I love my roots in engineering. I love what I've done up to this point, but I've changed over the last 15 years since I chose that career in college as a young 20-something-year-old. I now have a wife and kids, live in a different state, gone through a lot of different things, and my priorities have shifted. And so for me, the problem wasn't that engineering was this villain or corporate America was this villain. It's that I had things that I valued now that I didn't value before, and I had changed, but I hadn't changed my trajectory and how I was showing up in the world. And so for me, it was getting incredibly honest about, well, what do I value? What does success look like for me? And what do I want in the future?
Thank you, first of all, for being transparent about that, because
Sure.
some people can feel a little bit, maybe struggle with that I've worked so hard. This should all feel right. Is there something wrong with me that I'm not feeling like this feels like success? And so I want to talk about success a little bit, because I think it means, when you're younger, as you were saying, in college, it looked one way. Now, mid-career, it's looking a different way. So maybe help me understand redefining success a little bit. Maybe what did it used to mean for you, and what does that look like for you now?
I think most of the surface level answers apply when you're younger because that's all you know and that's what's been modeled for you. And so it's the promotion, it's getting the paycheck. Like I said, it's maybe getting a license or credential or some sort of like achievement that you accomplished to like prove that you're the expert or knowledgeable. It could be getting that personal office. Like for a long time, when I started in engineering, I was just in the cubicles, right, amongst everybody. And then, at least at the firm I worked at, when you got licensed, you got your own office with a door that you could close and have the privacy. And although all those things I just listed are nice and good to have, there's no knock on any of those things, they aren't the real prize. they aren't the real, for me now, definition of success like you're talking about. And so for me now, success, I have multiple definitions. I have a wall over here that I keep things that I find in books and podcasts that I listen to about what success actually means. And before we jumped on this call, I wrote down two of them that really stand out to me, and I want to share them with you and your audience. First of all, success is a compelling future. So I think if there's anybody, including the old version of myself, where we don't see a compelling future, again, we instantly become disengaged. We're not showing up as our full self and our full potential because there's just nothing that excites us. And then my second definition of success that I love, at least for me personally, is success is wanting to do this again. So whatever you're doing, it's more of an approach or a philosophy or a feeling than anything. So it's whatever you're doing, regardless of if it's a 9 to 5 or you own a business or you're spending time with your family, or even if you're just on vacation. When I go on vacation with my kids, I approach that because 4 little kids in a van driving across the country sometimes is a little rowdy and a little hectic and chaotic. And so I approach that with, how do I make this trip to Disneyland or whatever it may be a success, in the sense that I want to do it again and my family wants to do it again. And I think those definitions are really applicable to kind of this second half of life. I think you can have these as a younger individual, but I think you appreciate it more, again, as life changes and you have a family and your priorities shift to kind of like proving yourself and building your career, to all of a sudden you're like, man, I kind of want to work on the life that I have, not necessarily the career that I'm building.
You know, you specifically now get to work with mid-career professionals, right?
Yeah.
To really kind of pivot, really better zone in on what really matters. And I guess, let's get to maybe the problem here, or I don't know if you would call it a problem, but maybe the challenge. But why do you think that so many mid-career professionals struggle to even know what they want? Because I went through this too myself, where I was like, just like you, I had the titles, the income was great. But it was like, there's more, but I don't know what more. I almost felt greedy, thinking that I deserved more. So why do you think that is? Why do we struggle to really even know what we want? Because we've achieved all those things we once did want.
Two things that I'll say to that. You feel, especially kind of middle of your career, if you've experienced any sort of external success in whatever you're doing, and you're paying the bills and life is at least okay. In those cases, which is how I kind of found myself in my career, is like, I'm paying the bills, food's on the table, I have a family that's healthy and happy. You could go through and kind of externally check all the boxes and be like, why is this not enough? And you start to almost feel bad or ungrateful for the blessed life that you have. And I struggle with that quite a bit, and I think a lot of other people do as well. And what I've come to realize, that ambition and gratitude are not enemies.
Ooh,
they're two sides of the same. They're two sides of the same coin. And I write a weekly newsletter, and I wrote about this exact idea. It was kind of on the idea of stewardship. I was walking with a friend of mine that's also a business owner, and we were chatting, and something came out of my mouth that I felt like wasn't an original thought of mine, or at least I had never thought it before. And I shared it with him, and as it came out of my mouth, I was like, that rings true to me. Even though I said it, it sounded like almost somebody was talking to me. It was a really weird experience. But I told him, talking about the struggle of like being grateful for what you have, but also striving for more, or what's next, or whatever that may be. And I said, I'm going to butcher my own quote though. I said, I think that the most selfish thing that we can do is live a life of mediocrity. So I think we use this almost false sense of humility to be like, oh, I'm so grateful for what I have, and therefore I'm not going to strive to grow and progress and pursue more, because that would be unselfish of me, right? And so we kind of live this mediocre life, is what I would call it, where we're not aiming, no, we're not swinging for the fences. We're not aiming for something bigger and something better. We're not trying to improve. We're just kind of humbly happy with what we have. And I think that's actually a selfish approach. And I'm not preaching, on my soapbox or anything. I'm talking to myself right now. I've had to convince myself over the last several years to start a business because I have something to offer. and I want to make a big impact and help other people. And for a long time, I thought, well, that's selfish of me. Who am I to go out there and start this business? And what do I have to offer? And can't I just be happy with what I have? And I think the trick there is that both things can be true. You can be grateful and you can be ambitious. And I think the most unselfish thing you can do is actually be ambitious and fill your cup so that you can fill other people's cups and pay it forward. I think that's where I'm kind of getting with that. And then the other thing I wanted to comment on, you said something about, people have a hard time articulating what they actually want. And I think the main reason for that, in my experience and the people that I've worked with, is that we're just too busy. We're too busy to even give it thought. It's kind of this thing on the back burner that we're like, well, yeah, we'll get to that. We know that we need to like figure out, life going forward, but we've got kids' schedules to manage. We've got a career. We've got a demanding job. We've got a spouse, whatever we have, our cups are already all full. And we just can't even fathom like slowing down. And so I think we're simply too busy. And there's this quote by a guy named Ryan Holiday, a great author, writes about ancient Stoic philosophy. And he talks about slowing down. And it's one of my favorite quotes. And again, I'll probably butcher this too, but he says something to the effect of, this is what the best journals look like. They aren't for the reader, they're for the writer, to slow the mind down and to wage peace with oneself. And so he talks about journaling, but that could be, you could insert anything there. You could insert meditation or going on a walk or slowing down. He says the purpose of those activities is not productivity or to check something off the box or to get something done, which you and I empathize with. We're high achievers. We want to like get the stuff done. And the irony is we have to slow down sometimes to let that mental dust settle so that we can get the clarity that we need. And I love his phraseology there that he says to wage peace with yourself, because we think of waging war. And I think we're so caught up in waging war in our careers and our families and the sports, and like we're on offense all the time. And sometimes we need to dial that back and think defensively and think, well, what do I really want from life? And so I think our biggest enemy is ourself in that regard, that we're just too dang busy.
Well, and I think that sometimes we believe that we have time. We think, I'll do this when the kids graduate, when they're in school, when I retire, whatever, right? We believe that. But nobody has a promised future, and when you get to mid-career, which is still very young, mid-30s, we kind of don't see that is midlife. We think of midlife as maybe 50. Yeah. By 50 years old, hopefully you live to 100, but I'm going to backpedal just a minute here. And, when people realize when they're in that space that maybe you were in, what's maybe a first practical step maybe to kind of get started on finding more or finding a different or better path?
Yeah, in my coaching program, I use a framework that I've developed. It's called REDAC, REDAC. And the first step there is redefine. So it's redefine, realign, and reconnect. The first one is redefine. And so I think we're all guilty to some extent of being in a kind of a mass trance of just kind of following the leader, doing what the people did ahead of us, whether that's our parents or people that we went to school with. I have no problem with going to college and getting a corporate job and working a 9-to-5. I did that. I still do it. But I think the danger there is to do it simply because everybody else is doing it. And so at some point you get down far enough into your career and you go, well, is this what I really want? Is this it? Is this what I signed up for the next 30 years? And then we have to get really clear on redefining what success means for us. And that includes slowing down. That includes things like journaling and walking and doing that. So we spend a few weeks in my program just dialing in that definition. Although it may sound kind of woo-woo or whatever, of like talking about our feelings and journaling and those kinds of things, the people that do it are so grateful, because at the end of the program, they have these one-line definitions of what success looks like for them. And as life changes, as they progress through life and become grandparents or retire or whatever it may be, then they can go back and redefine that definition for that phase of life. And so there's another quote by an ancient philosopher named Heraclitus. He says, no man steps in the same river twice, because it's not the same river and he's not the same man. And so life is the river. It's always changing. but we're also changing. And so the program that I have is I give people the tools that they can use right now for this phase of life, but they can revisit those tools as life goes on and use them. It's like reading a book the second time. The words haven't changed, but you're a different person when you read the book.
Hey, it's Ali, popping in here real quick just to let you know, if you were enjoying the conversation with Jake and you'd like to go a little bit deeper, he has created a free resource for you. It is a playbook that will give you 3 actionable steps that you can take today to step into your next chapter by design and not by default. You can access it at activelyhuman.com/playbook. And now back to the show.
And so they have that tool in their tool belt, so to speak, to constantly redefine what success means for them. So that's the first step. The framework came from my own experience and getting to this place in my career and more so my life where it was like, what am I doing? Like I'm ready to burn this all down, and thank goodness for my wife that's like the sane person in the relationship that's like, you don't have to burn it all down. We'll figure this out. And she's been my sounding board. And so it comes from my own experience of redefining success for me in my current phase of life and being like, is the promotion that important to me? Is the license that important to me? I looked to the guys that were 10, 15, 20 years ahead of me and the lifestyle that they had, at least that I could see from the outside. And I said, I don't know that I want that. And so I started to go, well, what do I want? And so I built this idea of like, okay, I'm going to define my own definition or come up with my own definition of success for me and my family right here, right now. And so that's where that started. Then the problem becomes it's really frustrating once you nail that definition down, because you realize that you're not living in that way. And perhaps some things need to change. And so that's where the realign, the second part of the framework came to be, realign with what matters most. So once you're really clear on your core values and what success means to you and how you want to show up in the world, now you have to actually go do that. You have to look at your days and your weeks and your schedule and what you're committed to, what you're saying yes to, what you're saying no to, and the type of person that you want to become. So that's realigning your days and your weeks and your year with the type of person you want to be and who you want to become. And then the last part, which was a bit of a surprise to me and also to a lot of the people that I work with, is the way I frame it is it's redefine, realign, and reconnect. So redefine success, realign with what matters most, and reconnect with the people that you value most in your life. And that last one was kind of a surprise to me. It's common sense. It sounds like, well, yeah, that makes sense. But the redefine is kind of the strategy or the head to me, as far as like the approach of like it's analytical, it's logical. You can write it down. You can make a plan. It's the planning phase. The realign is more of the tactics, or what I call the hands, like the actual doing, the actions. The last part of the 3-part framework, reconnect, is more of like a byproduct. It's the results that come from doing that. And you naturally reconnect with your spouse and your kids and the people you love because you're living in alignment with the person that you want to be. And so there are some things that I teach in my coaching to help reconnect with your loved ones, but it's almost like a byproduct of the process or a result of the process.
Is there a specific part that maybe you find people resist the most? And if so, why? Or do they just embrace all 3 and they're like, cool, love this?
I think when you explain it like I just did, people go, yeah, of course. When you get to the nitty gritty of like, well, let's implement this for you. I would say that what people resist the most is in the initial phase of defining success and kind of that transition to realign. So redefine and realign, like going from the strategy to the tactics. There's this element of identity that's involved. You kind of have to shed some of your old skin, like a snake sheds their skin sometimes. You don't have to burn it all down. You're not starting over, but there are some parts of you that to become this new version of yourself, you have to let go. And there's some grief and some pain and some loss with that. And we're humans and that's how it's supposed to be. But it's a little difficult. And the reason I bring up the piece about identity, there's a great book, which I'm sure you've read and almost everybody's read, Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talks about obviously habits, but one of the key things he talks about in there is that he's talking about behavior change and how habits, are involved with that. And he says true behavior change is identity change.
Wow.
And a lot of times we try to go to the gym and lose 10 pounds because we want the outcome. We want the weight loss. We want whatever that is. And we can do that in the short term. But for any long-term habit, we actually have to start with identity, how we perceive and see ourselves. And so instead of starting with, I want to lose 10 pounds, the identity we need to adopt is, I want to be a healthy person. And then we take action as a healthy person, and then that's a more sustainable long-term goal. The problem is, it's really hard to do, to shed that old skin and adopt a new identity. And so I think that would be my answer to that question, is that it's a little, there's a little bit of friction there with people because we get comfortable with who we are. Even though we know we want to go somewhere else and be somebody else and improve and be better and all that stuff, it's just like going to the gym. It's like, it's a great idea until we got to put the shoes on and go to the gym. It's hard. And so that identity piece is probably the hang up for most people.
Well, and our circle of friends, I've seen this in my own life. It becomes very challenging for you to shed that skin because what I've noticed is your circle of friends or people that know you, your colleagues, well, they've known you as Jake the engineer. And now all of a sudden you're some coach. Like initially, like you're a fraud. Who you start to feel those feelings of like, who am I to be this thing? You doubt yourself. And then our circle of friends or colleagues are like, yeah, who are you? So I have said this, we have to believe in ourselves first. And then once we show up consistently time over time doing that new thing, people will adjust. They'll come to see our credibility there. And just on a personal note, I saw that a lot in my career selling real estate. It was very difficult, especially for individuals who were in very lovely, massive homes. There was status and clout that came with having $1 million home. How do you go from, this appearance of wealth to now maybe living in a 2-bedroom apartment? It was not very easy to do. I always admired the courage of those who had the ability to shed that skin and lean into a new personality, because sadly, I saw too many people stay in situations financially that were not the right fit for them anymore, but they lacked what I'm saying is courage, because it takes a lot to shed your old skin. So tell me, as you've been coaching many people now in midlife and really getting clear using this framework, is there maybe a transformation story, someone that stands out top of mind in what you call the second summit, which I love, such a beautiful visual that maybe sticks with you that you'd kind of like to share with us?
Sure. And the reason I call my group cohort the Second Summit is kind of stealing an idea from a guy named David Brooks. He wrote a book called The Second Mountain. And he talks about how a lot of people in life climb their first mountain, which is exactly what we just defined. It's the money, it's the career, it's the corner office, it's the promotion. And there's no judgment and nothing wrong with that first mountain. We almost all do that. And it's almost like a pattern. It's just a pattern. It's a necessary part of life. But many people get to the top of that first mountain and they look around and they go, I don't know if this is it for me. And they start to they start to climb this other mountain. But before they can climb the second mountain, they go into what he calls the valley of despair and bewilderment. And so it's kind of this regression of sorts where we're disengaged. We don't know what's next. It's a little scary. We know we need to shed some old skin. And it's a real fear, what you just mentioned, of like losing your network and friends when you do shed that skin. Like it actually happens sometimes. And the fear is that we will be alone because we'll lose that group of friends. When in reality, even if we do lose those friends or circle of, network or whatever, on the other side of that are new friends and better friends that are going to support us even more, a better network, and we'll be able to show up for them as well. And so that's why it's called the Second Summit, is that I'm trying to help people that are in that valley, they're trying to climb their next mountain, whatever that may be. It may be a career pivot. It might be just something within their family that they're doing. I'm working with a guy right now that's kind of going through a faith crisis And so everybody's second mountain is a little bit different. I'll share an example. I won't use his name. We'll just call him John for privacy reasons. He lives here in Utah, and I love working with people locally. I work with people all across the United States, but when they're local, I get to meet with them in person, which is awesome. And I worked with him for 16 weeks. He's a business owner. Not all my clients are, but he is. He started his business 4 years ago, and he's an engineer like me. And he was doing the engineering thing as an employee, and he was kind of building this business for somebody else. And he thought, well, if I could do this for them, I could do it for myself. And I think any entrepreneur, that has some similar story where they're like, I'm going to build my own empire instead of building somebody else's. And so he ventures off on his own. And over the last 4 years, again, externally, if you saw the numbers on the page, you would be like, wow, this guy's killing it. He's got 17 employees. He has recurring revenue. Clients keep coming back. They have tons of work, and they're just doing a really bang up job. The problem is he reached out to me because for the last 4 years, he's worked 70 plus hours. And that doesn't work because he's got 5 kids and a wife, and he never sees them.
Wow.
Similar to me, he's got, physical health issues where his health is declining. He's overweight and he knows he needs to work on that. And there's a whole list of other things that are important, the things that we can kick off till tomorrow, right? And then 4 years later, tomorrow never, shows up. And so he calls me, and on our first call, he goes, I have 1 year left of doing this before, I burn it all down and get another job and just close the business. And he said, I need help learning how to trust my employees and delegate the work because I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm doing the work and I'm being the boss. I'm bringing in the work. I'm doing business development. I'm doing all the stuff I need to do to keep the doors open, but I'm also doing the work. And I need to trust and delegate. The problem was he wasn't wrong 100%, but that wasn't really the problem. He has great employees. He hired them for a reason. They do really good work. He can trust them. He can delegate to them. So what I find interesting is a lot of times we know what we need to do, but we struggle with actually doing it. And for him, the key to this was, again, identity. He had a hard time taking off the hat of individual contributor because that was safe to him. He knew how to do it. He'd done that for almost 2 decades previously in his career. And he's kind of trying to put on the CEO, president hat, like business owner hat, but yet he has 1 foot over here and 1 foot over here, and he's not fully committed to either one. And so really it had nothing to do with his employees, and it had everything to do with how he viewed himself as the boss of the company. And so once he stepped into, I'm the boss and I don't do the work, but I work through other people. Maybe that's 10% at the beginning of a project and 10% for quality control at the end of a project, but let his employees, actually do the work. Then he frees up his time to do more meaningful things. He gets to go home at 5 o'clock, be with his family. And now he's making more money, spending less time. And he's not, in his mind, he's like, if I do that, I'm a slave driver. I'm whipping my employees and get back to work, And what we talked about is, no, you're empowering them to learn and to grow and to develop their skills just like you did in your career. And so, again, it comes back to this piece of identity of him allowing his employees to empower them and to do more than what he thought they were capable of. But even more so, him putting on the identity of this new identity of I'm the business owner now. And so I have to shed the individual contributor identity, and I have to fully embrace the leader identity.
This story, I can see a lot of myself. I know my listeners are going, that's me. So let's talk about identity here for a minute, because I find this to be very common with high achieving individuals. And I've always kind of wondered, is there something wrong with me? But I don't know. I think it just comes attached with being high achieving. But why do you think that it tends to be, and I'm generalizing, but it tends to be that high achievers are often the ones who feel the most lost? Why do you believe that is?
I think we attach too much to achievement, possibly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe we let it
And
define us too a little bit, right?
we let it define us. And then the problem with defining success as any sort of achievement, and what I mean achievement is like some sort of goal out in the future that once we achieve it, we will then have the thing, right? Like once I get that license, once I get that promotion, once I make more money, then I'll be happy. And the problem is the high achievers, we get those things. Like we make it happen. We solve the problem. And then all of a sudden we go, oh, maybe this wasn't what I was after. And so then we chase something else. And the problem is the chase. And so I'm a firm believer that goals and milestones and those types of things are great to set the aim, but it's not the point. Like, what's the goal beyond the goal, right? And so if we focus on the goal beyond the goal, then really it's the journey that matters, not the final destination, right? And so I think maybe that's part of the problem. We get lost because we keep hitting the benchmark and then we're kind of like, but this isn't it. Where do I go now? You know, and we're like, squirrel, you know.
For a long time, I thought there was something wrong with me. I think sometimes too, we get addicted to the struggle, the challenge, right? We're so used to being in the climbing up the summit that once we get there, we're like, well, now what? You know, and so I don't know. That's just speaking for me personally. But you spoke about Atomic Habits, great, phenomenal book, which I'm sure all of my listeners have heard of. Let's talk about habits for a minute, as far as like maybe one or two habits that you believe made the biggest difference in your own realignment that might help somebody listening do the same.
Yeah, I kind of talked about it real briefly, but I'll go a little deeper. People have talked about this to death, but I think there's a reason for it. When we recognize patterns, when we read these, you know, what are they called now? Not self-help books, but like self-improvement books, or we listen to the podcasts and we go, oh, I've heard this story, you know, like give me something new. There's something about things that show up over and over again for a reason. And one of those is having a morning routine. You could take that at a very high level, that like whatever works for you works. And I'll just share my morning routine, which I talked a little bit about earlier, but it's real simple. And I like simple things because I can remember them. That's why my framework is only 3 things, because then I can remember them and I can do them. And my morning routine is read, write, and run. Those are the 3 things that I do. Sometimes it's an hour of each. Sometimes it's 15 minutes of each. You know, it doesn't have to be that complicated. But those 3 things, they help me with my physical health, which is a big thing for anybody, and they help me with my mental and emotional and spiritual health. And so they cause me to slow down and to not be engaged with the busyness of life, that's emails and everything, phone calls and sports things with the kids, and all things that are also good. But what I always tell my clients is that another definition of success for me is that success is choosing the important over the urgent. Oh. And specifically in the morning, that the morning is not about productivity. It's not about checking any boxes. It's not about making the best use of your time. It's about what things are important to you to have the life that you want, so that you can be the best when you get to work, or when you have to be dad or mom or whoever it may be. And so for me, I'm very deliberate with my morning routine. And again, it's not like a checkbox kind of thing. It's more of like, what can I do in the morning that helps me feel at peace and wage that peace within myself, but also like fill up my cup so I can fill up other people's cups. So the habit would be, again, at a very high level, is to develop a morning routine of sorts that benefits you and the people around you. And you know, some of the obvious things is like, put your phone away, don't be answering emails, like leave the electronics till later. Probably wake up earlier than you think you need to, just to kind of get some. I'm not like a 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. kind of guy. I wake up at 6 and I read, write, and I run, and I take my kids to school by 7:40. And so I do all of my stuff in an hour and 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. And am I perfect? No, I'm not perfect. I don't always wake up at 6 o'clock. I don't always get all that time in, but that's my aim. And I think it's one of the best habits that anybody can have, is just develop some sort of basic morning routine that gets you in the right mindset for the rest of the day.
I like it. It's simple. You don't have to radically do anything too different. It's one habit or one action you can take today. If you don't have a morning routine, add one or maybe improve upon it. And I guess when you look at people who kind of are in this place where they're not really sure, how do I make this change? Or as I love the term you have said, I am going to burn this down, which I have felt many times too. What's a question that you wish more people would ask themselves before making a big life or big career decision?
So when you're making big life decisions, whether that's moving or taking a new job or accepting a promotion or whatever it may be, getting married, having kids, all those big things, the other end of the stick is, do you want the lifestyle that comes with that decision?
You're right. And I would add the first part of your REJACT framework is probably that piece too, is possibly redefining success. And so talk to me about, I love your cohort, the second summit. Who is this program really great for?
Yeah, so I spent the last 18 months or so coaching individuals one-on-one, and it's been a phenomenal experience. I think for me, I've learned a lot and I've grown. I've coached 10 people now one-on-one. They've had fantastic experiences with me and have loved kind of the transformation that we've been able to accomplish in a short period working with them. I was in the same group accelerator as you, Ali, with Dustin Riekman, and that opened my eyes. It was a group accelerator, 12 people, and that really opened my eyes to the power of the group. And so I thought, I'm not going to stop necessarily doing one-on-one, but I'm going to try this group thing because I think there's power in having, instead of just me and one person, having 5 or 10 or 12 people in a group to kind of collaborate and help and do all that. And so in March, I'm launching my first group coaching program called the Second Summit. It'll be the first week of March, and I'll do one every quarter thereafter.
Tell us a little bit about, you've already coached a rather, I'd say, pretty nice sized group through this process already, whether that was through a group or through one-on-one. In your experience, what was maybe the biggest shift that people experienced by the time that they went through the program?
Yeah, I think what they walk away with, I tell anybody that's looking into working with me, the 3 things you walk away with is, 1, you'll have your own personal definition of success. And I know that sounds simple or easy, or why can't I do that on my own? And the honest answer is a lot of us don't. We just don't take the time to slow down. And there's, again, this element of community and group and accountability that's awesome to kind of help you work through some of these things. So the first promise is you'll have a personal definition of success, of what success means for you right here, right now in your life. The second one is realign. So we'll give you a system and a tracker and accountability to be able to then implement those things into your life so that you'll have a definition and you'll start to kind of swing the pendulum so that it's in alignment with the person that you want to become. And then the last promise is that you'll not only connect with or reconnect with your loved ones at home, but now you'll get to connect with this wonderful group of individuals in the group. And I have a really simple kind of equation that I use for that last one. I know I mentioned reconnect is kind of like a byproduct, but there's also some intentional things that you can do to connect with other humans, including your own family and your network and coworkers and other people. And the equation is really, really simple. It's something that I've learned just these last couple of years. It's create something of value, share it with other people, and that will help you connect with humans. And so that could be, what that looks like is that could be, well, I'm going to schedule the babysitter to come over so that I can take my wife on a date. Like, that takes time and effort, and I have to create that environment to go on a date with my wife. Mm-hmm. That could be, my wife loves to bake. That could be making cookies and taking them to a neighbor and sharing and kind of building a connection that way. It could be building a business like I'm trying to do and gathering people to participate and share in this. And so if we lean into being a little more human, and that's why my business is called Actively Human, then we create something of value, share it with other people, and connect. So create, share, connect. And hopefully that's the biggest takeaway from the group, is that it's kind of an unexpected thing. But it's more like, okay, I have this definition, I'm now in alignment, but now I'm connected to so many more people, and we all want that and need that.
I was going to ask you, your company name is called Actively Human. So I was kind of curious, like what your definition of being that, and especially in a world that continues to be more isolated because of social media, that we're driving towards AI. Like, what is your personal definition? Like when you think of being actively human, is it those three things you just talked about, or would you add to that in any way?
That's part of it. And what I'll say is this. I'm no old dog by any means. I don't feel like I'm an old dog. I turned 40 next year, or this year, I guess now, in February, in just a month. But I have been around the block a few times, and I was recently reflecting on just where I've been in the world and through my life, and I wrote down a few things. I've lived in 25 different houses or apartments in my life in 40 years. I've lived in 14 different cities, 2 different countries. I've had over 40 roommates, and that does not include my wife and kids or my 6 siblings growing up or anything like that. And I've had 22 jobs. And the reason I list those off is because I've been around a lot of different people in a lot of different situations, whether that's career or geographically or whatever it may be. And I've taken away 2 insights about people, including myself. And the first is that we all want to be engaged in meaningful work. Mm-hmm. We all want that. Everybody wants that. Nobody's lazy. They just might not be in the right fit in what they're doing, right? We all want to be engaged in something meaningful and be challenged, and we want to grow. And then the second thing is we all want to be connected to other people. We want deep, meaningful relationships. And so that caused me to think like, well, how do we do that? How do we get engaged? And that's the first 2 part of the framework is redefine and realign. The last part is like, well, how do we connect with other people? And I think there's many ways to do that, but one of the best ways is what I shared earlier. It's create something of value and share it.
I guess my final question would just be, knowing what you know now about success and fulfillment and even identity, what do you know now about those things that you wish you had known 10 years ago?
Only we are going to create the lives that we want, and we have to do that. So it's worth it. I'll leave it on that.
Thank you for spending time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. I love being here. Thanks for having me.